Mobile hunters, are you looking to make the move to saddle hunting this year? Or maybe you just want to add a few new pieces of gear or upgrade your current saddle gear. If that's the case, then head over to tetherednation.com where they've got all mobile hunters covered. Whether you're new to saddle hunting or an old timer, Tethered is your one-stop saddle shop. From saddles to ropes, sticks, ascenders, whatever it is you need, they have you covered. I've personally been using their gear for the past 3 seasons now. My base setup consists of the Phantom saddle and the Predator platform. And if you're wondering why I've chosen to use their gear above all else, here's the cliff notes. They're innovative and pushing the mobile hunting forward overall. They cut no corners and prioritize the safety and performance of their gear. They care about the community that they've created, and their gear allows me to hunt free. And above all else, I like to support good people doing good work. If you're interested in upping your mobile hunting game, then head to tetherednation.com. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee, guaranteeing to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker, they're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 217. Today, we are wrapping up the final installment of the DIY Report mini-series with John Eberhart, and we are talking about planning an out-of-state hunt. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. Coming at you with another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Nothing crazy to report here. Well, first, before I jump into the monologue here, I hope everyone had a good Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day fun can equal missed opportunities come fall, if you know what I'm saying. If you're picking up what I'm putting down. From now till hunting season is just about 9 months away, so that should help you figure out what I'm talking about. So you don't want to jeopardize your time in the timber. So I should have probably given this public service announcement in the last podcast to make sure everyone was kind of being mindful of consequences, so to speak. But with that, we'll kind of just jumped into deer hunting topics at hand here. So nothing crazy to report here. Still snowed in, dealing with weather, so I haven't had a chance to get out and do any type of scouting whatsoever, which is really kind of driving me crazy, man, because there's a couple new pieces I know that I've talked about that I've been chomping at the bit to get to, and it's just, they're under way more snow than I actually even have here, so it's just not even an option at this point. Pointless, actually, for me to even go do that. Not to mention that the trailer is completely snow plowed in, so it's going to be a little while before that thing takes flight. So I might have to do some digging out in the next couple weeks, but hopefully some of this stuff will melt off and be able to get out and start thinking about scouting, and then not too awful long here, we'll be thinking about doing some shed hunting. But not going to belabor this up front. We're just going to kind of jump into the straight dope, so to speak. Before I do that, though, if you wouldn't mind, head over to the website if you haven't yet. If you're interested in any Truth from the Stand merch, there's a page on the website, truthfromthestand.com. You can go there. There's shirts, sweatshirts, etc. That are there as well. And then if you wouldn't mind, also head over to the YouTube channel and give a sub if you haven't yet. I post some videos there from time to time on some DIY things, making stuff. You can watch how I built the entire trailer series, etc. So if you wouldn't mind, head over and do those two things for me. That would be awesome. But for today's show, we have Mr. John Eberhart on for our third installment. The previous two, we kind of picked John's brain about late season hunting and about postseason scouting. And in this one, if you listen to this show for any length of time, you know that I really am into travel hunting. Love it. It's one of my favorite things to do. It's why I took on the project of building that DIY trailer last year, is to be able to facilitate more of those types of hunts. And what has, I guess, really made those hunts really fun for me was, learning a lot from John in terms of like freelance hunting and stuff like that, because he's big on that and does a lot of that and has done a lot of that in his history, as well as Dan Enfalt and, a bunch of other guys that I've had on and that I've talked to. But John is really the one who kind of got me thinking in that direction. And a lot of the strategies that he talks about, in the books he's written and just in conversations that he's had on this podcast and others, really kind of apply to that approach and can provide you more opportunity for success, or at least good hunts. in places that you may not be familiar with. But one thing I've never talked to John about was really how he approaches out-of-state hunting, how he plans for those out-of-state hunts, things that he looks for, what type of states is he considering, like all those types of things that kind of go into like the planning phase of an out-of-state hunting trip. So that's really what we dive into today. Awesome talking to John as always. Always appreciate his perspective. You know, goes without saying that he knows his stuff when it comes to the deer woods. All you need to do is look at the mounts he has on his wall in high pressured areas, so he knows how to get it done. So with that, we will go ahead and jump into today's podcast. As always, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. You are listening to the third installment of this DIY Report mini-series with none other than Mr. John Eberhart. Mr. John Eberhart, how you doing, man? Or am I boring you to death yet? Or are you doing all right?
I am doing just absolutely fine, Clint.
Awesome, man. Well,
are you hanging in there too?
Oh man, dude, I'm having like I've been nipping on some whiskey. Yeah, I've been drinking some bourbon, so that's always a positive. And then in the previous session that we did, I shared a piece of knowledge with you that you told me that I was really smart. So I feel like I'm good to go for the night. Like that
was awesome.
Yeah,
I'd never heard of anybody doing that before.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool.
It's my night really couldn't get much better. So everything from here is gravy. So we're good to go.
And I know you have access to motion cameras.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So awesome. So this session, guys, if you're just picking this up, we did two previous sessions with John where we were talking about his late season approach and late season hunting in high pressured areas. The second session was really talking about how John goes about his postseason scouting and the process that he follows and so forth. In this session, what we're talking about is one of the things that is really near and dear to my heart, which is planning out-of-state hunts. And this is something that I'm really passionate about, you know, and just in general. I love to travel to hunt. I love exploring new areas. And there's a style of hunting, and we can even touch on this a little bit, John, as we kind of, you know, go through some of this stuff. But there's a style of hunting that's really given me a lot of confidence to hunt out of state because I'm a regular guy like anyone else. I don't have a ton of time to go out of state to scout. So a lot of times I'm showing up blind to places. And having to freelance, you know, and kind of freestyle hunt my way through a week to 2 weeks worth of hunting. And so that's something I picked up from John along the way. And so I thought it was pertinent that we talk to John about planning an out-of-state hunt because a lot of my approach is born from a lot of the stuff that I've learned from John. So to get things started, John, let's just start from the beginning. You're going to get ready to go on an out-of-state hunt. The season has ended. Maybe you even, you know, started your postseason scouting in your home state of Michigan, right? You're going to go out of state. You don't know what state yet. And let's just say for the purpose of this conversation, we're not taking into consideration draws or lotteries or anything like that. How do you start your planning process whenever you're going to go out of state? Like, are you, of course, thinking of the state first? You know, are you planning like the time of year? Like, just walk me through what you're thinking.
Well, the first thing I'm going to do if I'm going to go out of state, I'm going to go out to one of the premium states. I'm going to go to either, you know, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri. I would never go to Nebraska because the cool thing about Iowa and Kansas and even Ohio for out of state is their gun season's open late. Mm-hmm. So I could go out of state. Michigan's gun season opens on November 15th. I could actually leave on the 15th from Michigan and go to another state and bow hunt before their gun season opens because those states, their gun season's open typically in early December. I don't know. Ohio's kind of late November or early December. So I can still bow hunt, you know, during the peak rut and into the post rut. You know, I'm bow hunting before their gun season because once the gun season happens, then things go downhill really, really fast. But
right.
I think I had told you before that anytime I've went out of state for the first time to a new state, I never. One of the coolest challenges to me is to go out and figure something out on the fly. So in other words, you go to a new property, you've never been there before. You know, what I always look for if I'm going to go out of state is I always try to find public land or private land that has a lot of ag or a lot of open area. You know, and you get out in Kansas, for instance, because I'm typically in central to western Kansas. It's more plainsy. You know, I want to go out of state because it's going to be a short-term hunt. It's going to be 7 to 10 days. I want to go to an area that's not all timber. You know, like you go to southern Ohio, and it's just a lot of timber. And big timber is hard to hunt on a short-term hunt because there are no destination locations, and there's just too many places for the deer to wander. They just got too big of a territory. When you go to areas where there's a lot of ag or open pastures or just, prairie, where you've got, 80% open area to 20% timber, your odds are going to be much, much higher because the deer have a lot smaller locations to transition through and move through during daylight hours through the best security cover that they possibly can have.
Right.
So anytime I'm going out of state, I'm always looking for less timber, more open, whereas most hunters are looking for, everybody wants to go to the big woods,
Right.
Big woods out of state, but on a short-term hunt, the bigger the woods, the more it's not your friend,
Right.
because there's just no destination locations. There's too many places for the deer to be at any one point in time.
Right.
So kind of look for that. But when I go out of state, first time I go someplace, I scout in prep locations the first day and a half at least, typically the first 2 days. So I don't even think about bow hunting. All I'm doing is scouting and prepping locations. I usually will start hunting on day 3. Sometimes if I find a couple really good locations, 2 or 3 really good locations, I might hunt the second afternoon. But I always plan on leaving Michigan to where I'm going to get there at like 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm driving all night, and then I just unload in the hotel or wherever I'm staying, and then I go out and I scout. So I got a full day to scout and prep locations, and then the next half a day or the next full day. Sometimes I will hunt on that the second day in the evening, but
right.
But as far as the state, I always look for a state with lighter pressure that has a late gun season opener.
Yeah, no, I follow a very similar kind of process that you do in terms of picking my state. I'm definitely going to try to choose something that maybe offers me things that I don't have in my home state per se, from caliber deer and maybe just overall experience. And we're going to touch on some freelance hunting here in a second, because that's one of the things that I've picked up from you. And actually, the 2 most recent out of state hunts that I've done were all freelance hunting, and I absolutely love it. It's something I actually need to adopt more in my home state. But when you are looking at states, and it totally makes sense, like I never really thought of looking at places that have less timber, a higher open area to timber ratio, I guess is maybe a way to put it.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah,
yep.
That totally makes sense, and I've never really thought of that before. But are you focusing on? Is there any particular type of terrain that you want to kind of dive into? Like, for example, so say you're looking for that ratio that we just talked about, but are you kind of looking for places that might have elevation changes? Are you looking for places that might have more, river bottom or creek bottoms, maybe to use for easier access, that you can use a creek bed or whatever to get into a spot? Are you looking for anything specific like that? Or is it more just the ratio that you're focused on?
I definitely focus on the ratio first. That's hands down number one. I want 70 to 80% ag or open prairie or pasture, to 20 to 30% timber. Second thing I focus on, obviously in Kansas, you're not going to get any hill country.
Right.
So
right.
That's all going to be flat. So what I'm going to want in a Kansas type setting, and typically, like I said, I've always hunted central to western Kansas, and there's a lot of draws out there. And when I say draws, they're thousands of year old floodplains. So the land out there is pretty dang flat, and when they get heavy rains, all the rain drains into these draws, and these draws just meander through the countryside, and there's usually a draw every 3/4 to mile and a half. There's another draw, and the draws, you may be looking across the landscape and you'll see the tips of some trees out there halfway across the section, and you get out there and those trees are 120 feet tall. They're big, huge cottonwoods, and it's a 100-foot gulch draw. And they just meander through the countryside, and they're full of hemp, and they're full of, tall weeds, a lot of plum brush. And basically that is the only area during daylight where the deer can transition through and have some semblance of security cover. And they're also down in the draw. So if somebody was up on the flat plains, up in the crops or the plains, they can't visually see it. Now, when I'm going to Ohio, I like to go down to southern Ohio, and there's a lot of public land down there where it's right on the edge of the ag.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right where the ag butts up to, it starts to get hilly and into the timber. And I love hunting. I love hunting that. It's not as easy to hunt because there's more timber.
Mm-hmm.
But I love hunting it, and the deer tend to travel, because I'm always going out there late when all the foliage is down. They tend to travel down through the bottoms of the saddle between the hills.
Right.
Because it's lower ground, it's wetter ground. There's more vegetation down there. It's better security cover. Now, because I'm using scent lock, so I never worry about the wind. I can get away with hunting down in those saddles. Back before I knew how to use and properly use scent lock, there's no way I'd get away with that, because you always get busted with the wind when you're hunting in saddles, because you get so much swirling wind and thermals.
Yeah.
But I love hunting that hill country in Ohio, but I definitely, not even remotely close, have the same success rate. I think I've got a 33% success rate in Ohio on three hunts. In Kansas, I'm probably at 90%.
Wow.
Iowa's kind of the same. Actually, Iowa's probably a mix. Mm-hmm. When I've been to Iowa, I went to Iowa in 97, 99, shot a 180-incher out there on a freelance hunt in 2001. So I've been to Iowa probably 7 or 8 times, and I think I killed the book buck every time. So I think I'm 100% in Iowa. And most of those hunts I was by myself. I just went by myself. I've been going to Kansas with my 2 boys the last couple of times.
Right.
But Iowa's kind of a mix between the two. So Iowa, you're not going to get 70 to 80% open and 20 to 30% timber. Iowa, you're going to get about half and half. Half of the property where I've been public land, and even cold calling for free hunting permission, from plat books. It's usually been about 50-50 ag to timber, and it's typically been hilly. I've been in the southern portion of Zone 7, bordering Zone 5.
Right.
So Iowa's just, I don't know how to even say it. Iowa and Kansas are the best 2 states.
Right.
And when I went to Missouri one time, and I shot a 160-incher on a 40-acre parcel that I just cold called the guy, and he gave me permission. And that was almost all ag. His 40 was all bedding area. Everything around it was ag. And,
perfect.
Yeah, and that was a nasty hunt. It rained 4 days, from daylight till dark, and I sat daylight till dark all 4 days.
It was
Killed
worth
him
it.
on my lap. Oh yeah, it was worth it.
So how much are you? So this will be maybe a Kansas specific question,
okay.
And this is maybe a little bit selfish because I'm going to Kansas this year. So
okay, great state, best state in the country, in my opinion.
Nice, yeah. I'm looking forward to the trip. I'm trying to figure out exactly where I'm going to go, but I'm looking at like the different public land that they have there and stuff like that, because that's probably what I'm going to do. But when you're choosing where you're going, how much are you paying attention to, the walk-in access property that they have in addition to the public land that they might have? Because they do have like those walk-in access pieces. Yep. Are you hunting those, or are you kind of focusing on the public land pieces, or are you getting some knock on door, or what's the deal there?
Those walk-ons are getting very, very limited because there's so much leasing going on in Kansas over the last 10 years, because leasing everything up and hoarding it has become so popular.
Right.
And now there's like, when I first went to Kansas, where I'm at in 2004, there was no pay-to-hunt ranches. Now there's 8. In the little city I'm staying in, there's 8 different pay-to-hunt ranches, and all of the countryside around there's leased. So the way those walk-on hunting properties work, and there was a lot of them when I first went out there, is I think the state would pay them anywhere from 75 cents to $1.25 an acre just to have a WOH sign, and anybody could go in there and bird hunt or whatever they wanted to do hunt-wise. Well, now, they're going to lease those up, because the guys that are leasing it are paying them a lot more than $1 an acre to lease it. So you're not seeing a lot of that walk-on like you used to. There's still some where they just refuse to lease it to somebody. They want to let people hunt it, but it's very rare now. But back when I first started going out there, yeah, I hunted as much walk-on as I did public as I did private. It was probably equal between the three. And there was a lot of walk-on, and it was excellent property.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard if you can find the right pieces, like you can find some really great walk-on, pieces, especially when you get out more in the West where you may have fewer trees, and so you don't have as many, near as many deer hunters. I have some buddies who are proficient at hunting on the ground, and so they like the Western side for that because they're like, look, I get a lot more opportunity because a lot of guys don't want to go hunt it.
You're absolutely correct.
You have to hunt it from the ground, or 90% of it's from the ground, right? You might find a small draw somewhere or something like that with a couple trees in it. He's like, or a fence row or something like that. He's like, but by and large, if you're willing to go hunt from the ground and just do a lot of road driving and glassing to find where the deer are at and then making a move on them, he's like, then you'll have as much access as you'll want the further west you go, essentially.
Yep, that's 100% true. It's more plainsy the farther west you go, the less pressure it is because it's a farther drive. Because almost a lot of staters are coming from the east, northeast.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a farther drive, and people don't want to drive any farther than they have to. I've considered going farther west because where I'm at in central Kansas, it's starting. God, sounds weird for even to say it. It's starting to get some hunting pressure.
Right.
And when I say hunting pressure, you got to keep in mind,
right,
when you have got that much open area and that minimal timber, it doesn't take a lot of hunting pressure to totally disrupt the routine.
Right.
So I guess that's the best way to put it in perspective, because when they passed full inclusion crossbow a few years back, now just about everybody that was giving me free permission has some relative hunting their property, and they're all baiting. They all got feeders up. So by the time we get there, it's beat up pretty bad. Right. And I see a lot of the out-of-staters now that are hunting in. There's a lot of Michigan hunters that go to Kansas, a lot.
Yeah.
And now I'm seeing them coming home with 115, 120, 2.5-year-old, 125, 130 inchers.
Right.
And when I first started going out there, nobody thought about shooting anything under 140 inches. My minimal was 150 and up.
Right.
But now you're seeing a lot of these guys killing these 2-year-olds that are big and by Michigan standards, but that's the bucks. They're killing the bucks so they don't get to the old age group, for the guys that are more serious. And this year, I think Kansas, they gave permits to everybody, all the non-residents that applied this year.
Oh, well, yeah. You know what? That's funny because I had a buddy who, on a whim, he's like, I think I'm going to try to go to Kansas. And I was like, and I knew just because I was planning to go this year and I knew I was going to Missouri last year. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to buy a point. This was last year. I was like, so I know that I think like you're almost guaranteed if you have a 1 point or whatever. And so I was like, I should.
Oh yeah, you are 1 point. You're definitely guaranteed.
Yeah. I was like, I definitely want to go next year. I was like, so I'm just going to buy the point. And then my buddy he actually put in late and ended up getting a tag. So yeah.
I think they gave everybody a tag this year. I'm pretty sure that everybody I know that applied got a permit. And then somebody told me out there that Kansas gave everybody a permit. I don't know if it was COVID related. I have no freaking clue.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I'm glad I didn't buy one because it'd just be another one that I'd still be holding on to at this point because I currently have all of them. Yeah. So
yeah, and it is kind of interesting because I lost. I had permission on 5 different farms because when I first started going out there in 2004, it was super easy to get free permission. I mean, the public land out there is phenomenal, but I don't care what state you're in. Private is typically a little bit better, even if it's minimally. It's typically better than public.
Right.
So, I had 5 different guys give me free permission, and I lost 3 of them. So now I'm down to 2. So, and my kids both shot bucks out there this year. I did not. I watched a fight from hell. I watched the half rack 10 and a half rack 8. One would have been a 140. One would have been a 160 if they had the other side. They both had their left sides broke off. And I watched them have an all-out battle at 17 yards in front of me, and the 10-point poked out the 8-point left eye.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that, and I was just like, because didn't you see that deer the next day or like a couple days later or something like that without the eye?
Yeah, we had the half rack 8-point on camera 2 days earlier with both eyes. You know how after dark you can see a little glow.
Yep.
And then 2 days later we had that 8-point there. It was at a primary scrape area, and his left eye was missing. And I saw the 10 point when they were fighting right in front of me. His head made a quick left turn, and so that right antler went right into the side of that buck's face, and that 8 point after rack 8 just turned around and busted out of there like a bat out of hell. And I know that's what popped his eye.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if I would have lost an eye, I probably would have been out of there too. If I'm being honest.
Yeah,
I'm not sticking around. So I think what has to happen is I think you need to go to Kansas next year, and I think you need to shoot old one eye to kind of keep to
you know what? I never thought about that, but I'll definitely be able to recognize it.
Yeah.
That's one downside of going to Kansas late during post-rut. I love hunting post-rut when I go out of state in a state where they have a December opener for gun, because post-rut, the mature bucks, they're locked down almost for about 2 weeks from November 7th to about the 22nd, somewhere in there. And the big dominant bucks, they're just doed up. And then about the 22nd, 23rd, 24th, you start seeing those bigger bucks, but because they have to start looking and actually getting off their butts and searching for those late estrus does. So they have to get up and physically move out of wherever they're bedding. And their guard is down. You can just tell they've lost a lot of weight. They're just tired, and they just move with reckless abandon. But the downside is I would bet 60 to 70% of them have busted up antlers.
Oh yeah.
By that time.
Yeah. My buddy was just out there. He actually went out. Well, he was out there in early season, missed. Oh, I shouldn't say early season. He was out there in, I want to say maybe like the 3rd week of October, if memory serves. And he missed a really good deer. It's probably 160-inch deer roughly. And then, he's from Iowa. So he was back in Iowa hunting, and then he went back out in late season, to try to fill his tag. And he ended up filling his tag on the last day was going to be in Kansas. And it was a really good deer, but his whole right side is just like, I mean, just every tine is broken. You know what I mean? Just like his left side is great, but like the whole, like, it's like there's 2 inches missing off of this one. There's 3 inches missing off of this one. You know what I mean? Just like busted up, you know? And I was
There's so many mature bucks out there, and they beat the crap out of each other.
Yeah. I mean, that's why rattling out there works, man. Like crack them together. It's like if you're at the right spot, man, you crack them together out there, they'll come running. You know, it's like, but they're fighters, you know. So it's like it's funny because whenever he shot that deer, he actually FaceTimed me. I was working, and he FaceTimed me. I knew exactly what happened. You know, whenever he FaceTimed me, because like, well, he's not going to video call me. I was like, unless he'd shot something. So I pick it up. And I was like, you get something? He's like, yeah. And I was like, and he's showing it to me. I'm like, he's like, dude, he is all busted up. Like, he's like, his body's all like lumpy. And it's like, he's all scratched up. Face is all scarred up, you know, and the right side of his rack is all broken up and stuff.
I wonder why he shot him.
Well, last day. And it was just a really, I mean, if he had everything, he was probably, I don't know. Cause I haven't seen like the final pictures.
But he didn't.
Right. But I mean, he still had a decent rack. You know, I think it was one of those things. You know, I don't want to tell his full story here because I'm going to have him on to talk about it. But he had a pretty rough year, and he's talked about this personally. So I'm not telling any tales that he hasn't mentioned before. He had a pretty rough year personally with like some family health and stuff like that, and it was just one of those things where it's like the year that anything that could have went wrong did go wrong type of thing.
Yep.
And it was a little bit of a redemption hunt type of thing. So it's a great deer, you know, but it was more of like, let's close the chapter on this freaking year and get out of here. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. But getting back to I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
I had a situation like that. I was hunting next to a pretty dense bedding area of pine trees, which is extremely rare in Kansas. And there was a primary scrape area just outside the edge, and I was hunting that for like 3 days. And we had pictures of this it's probably a 25-inch inside spread, 12 point. And finally on the 20, they were all nighttime. They were all after dark pictures. And I know what was happening. He was in those pines, you know, doed up, and he'd come out after dark with the does. And so anyway, as I think it was on the 23rd, on the evening of the 23rd, he came out. He came out of those pines, and he must have gotten a fight, you know, that day or the day before, because we had a picture of him 2 days earlier with all of his points, and he had 5 points broke off.
Yeah.
And I took a picture with my cell phone, and I mean, this thing was, I'm being very cautious when I say 24-inch inside spread.
Jeez.
It was at least 24-inch inside spread.
Good Lord, man. That's crazy, man. So yeah,
Even 12 yards, I didn't shoot. I won't shoot them when they're busted up like that.
Right. Yeah, I'd have to say that I would be hard pressed to not. There might have been there might have been carbon flying if I were there. That might have been just gonna put that out there.
Well, I was thinking maybe next year, but I never saw him again. So.
Right. All right, so we're gonna get back on the topic of the planning the out of state hunt there. I mean, that was all related, but there's a couple other questions I have here for you because I'm just curious to how you kind of approach some of this. So we've gotten the parcel kind of narrowed down at this point, right? Like as far as we know I shouldn't say narrowed down. We know what we're looking for. We know we want a higher ag to timber ratio. We're going to look for maybe some things that have some draws and stuff like that, some different type of features that we might want to focus on and stuff like that. How are you qualifying a parcel that's something that is worth your time to hunt, right? And so what I mean by that is like, so say, for example, you're in Michigan and let's pretend you don't have any free permission and you've maybe not been to a piece of public land out there and you're trying to find where you're going to go. And you might be able to go out and scout it later, but you still need to figure out where you're going to go scout, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you qualifying it to say, okay, this is the spot that I'm going to go check out? Like what things have to line up for you on an out-of-state hunt like that to say, this is a place where I'm going to go spend either my time scouting or my time potentially freelance hunting?
Well, the cool thing about it nowadays is you got Onyx. So basically you pull up aerial maps and you try and find some semblance of pinch points or some openings back in timber. Because most of the public land out there is still a lot of timber.
Right.
I mean, most public lands in every state is still a lot of timber. You don't get a lot of ag. So, and then once I start scouting, I'm still looking for scrape areas. I mean, out there's so many scrape areas out there. It's just unbelievable. There's scrapes everywhere. So you got to look for areas where, just like here, even though they're not as security cover oriented, mature bucks always, no matter where they're at, they're going to tend to travel within or down the edges of the best security cover possible to get to point A to point B during daylight hours.
Yep.
So I'm still looking for security cover, but I'm setting up on primary scrape areas. We had 11 trees prepped this last fall. All of them were at scrape areas, every single one. I think for the last 10 years I've been out there, every location has been at a primary scrape area. And typically out there, anytime there's some semblance of a pinch point, connecting two areas of timber or if you got a draw meandering through the countryside, whether it be on free walk-on property or even the draws even run through the public lands, the draws meander. They not only meander through the countryside, they get narrower and wider, in different locations. So you always want to look for the narrowest spot because that's going to be the most congested deer activity. And the more the congested the doe activity, the more odds are there's going to be scrapes there. And that's obviously where the congested buck activity is going to be because all buck activity during rut phases revolves around the doe activity.
Right.
So you're looking for pinches. You don't really see much out there, at least in Kansas, for food. They don't really have oaks. When they feed, they basically come up out of the draws or come out of the timber and eat in the pastures or the prairies at night, or the ag. Where I'm at, I'm so far west, they don't really grow corn. It's milo and green fields. Corn, it's too arid for corn. So
nice. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I look for. I mean, I followed a lot of the same stuff you just talked about. I'm somewhat of a disciple of your of many of your approaches. One of the things that I do look for though too is diversity of habitat. I try to find those areas where different habitat meets new habitat, whatever that is. For one, it just gives me more options, and two, it creates definitive edges, and we all know that deer are edge creatures, and so it gives me a really good starting points to kind of know where I want to start scouting because I can kind of see where that diversity of habitat kind of lies. And usually, if I can find stuff that's a little bit wet, it also provides like a little bit more, a little bit more growth, so it tends to be a little bit a little bit thicker.
You're not going to find much of that in western Kansas.
Right. I'm speaking outside of Kansas,
okay.
just generally speaking, if someone was going to go to Ohio or, Missouri.
Terrain featured dumps and stuff.
Yeah. I'm just looking for any type of diversity, is one of the things that I'll look for. And even, in Kansas, it might just be different diversity, because I think it's one of the things we've talked about consistently is you have to kind of contextualize all these terms that we use for where you're hunting. Right. So diversity of habitat in Kansas means something entirely different than it does if you're in Missouri. Right. It's just there's many different things. It's just different. So diversity in Missouri might be a ridge system dumping into a creek bottom. Right. And that you have like that diversity of habitat. And then whenever you're in Kansas, it very well may be a CRP field that ends up dumping into a drainage, you know what I mean? Or a draw. Right. Or meeting up against a fence row or something like that,
or a tall milo field button up to a draw, or sometimes, and it's rare out there, but once in a while you'll get two draws that intersect. And obviously where they intersect is a really hot spot.
Right. I was just going to say, like, that's like X marks the spot there, I'm sure, for that.
Yeah.
But, so on these trips, man, when you're going out of state, are these percentage wise, how often are you freelance hunting these? And how often are these kind of places that you've postseason scouted or scouted to some degree?
I never go out of state and pre-scout ever.
Okay.
Never. I know Andy May does that a lot. He gets permission someplace or public land. He'll go out there, in September and August and do a lot of scouting and put cameras up. I don't do that. So, what was the question?
It was percentage of freelance hunts versus postseason scouts. So it sounds like 100% like freelance, and then as you hunt those places over time, like you just start to learn them.
No, it's not 100% freelancing, because I typically, like I mentioned, spend the first day and a half to possibly 2 days.
Got it.
Scout the property and prep locations. But if, like the 180 incher in Iowa, I killed 2 monsters in Iowa on freelance hunts. But I had went to a preset location that I had scouted and prepped the first day or two I was there. And then because I'm always out there in late November, I got a big visual because all the foliage is down. I was seeing deer activity, a couple 100 yards away, and I wasn't seeing much where I was. Just because you scout and you think you're picking out the best locations doesn't mean you always are.
Right. Yeah.
So, I'm not stupid. And when I see activity at a distance, even though I didn't see the monster bucks that I ended up shooting back there, I saw general deer activity much more so than where I was. So I got down at like 10 in the morning. It was going to be an all day sit, and I had a decoy out, and I packed up the decoy and just left it for my exit. I wasn't going to carry it with me. And I just really slowly went 200 yards, 250 yards back closer to this big river. And I found a scrape area from frickin' hell. It was just unbelievable. 4 monster scrapes. I mean, it was one of those spots, Clint, where it just smacks you in the face and say, you're an idiot if you don't hunt right here.
Right.
you know? So I prepped a tree and I shot a 180-inch buck that evening. And the other one was the same deal. I was hunting and I just wasn't seeing anything. I wasn't really seeing any other activity at a distance. I just wasn't seeing anything where I was, and it was just going to be an all-day sit. So I got down and just moved back or deeper into the junk and set up. And that one I had a decoy with me as well. I set up a decoy as a doe, and I had about 150-inch buck come in about an hour before dark. And it was a kind of a weedy area back by a river with some scattered brush. And as soon as he saw that doe, he just came right into that doe decoy on him. Yeah. On a line, just like a beagle on a rabbit.
Yeah. It's man, I tell you what, I've followed you. I mean, I've, followed a lot of your stuff for a lot of years, and I've mentioned that multiple times. And one of the things that I've really kind of fallen in love with that I've learned from you is freelance hunting, to where I almost don't like to go out of state and hunt unless I'm doing a freelance hunt. Like, that's kind of my preferred method. And like, so the last 2 trips I've taken, one was Iowa, freelance hunted that whole trip. I mean, I actually went out in March and scouted and shed hunted, and ended up hunting a piece of property completely different of where I scouted and started from scratch. And, you know, ended up killing it, ended up missing one a couple times. Everyone who listens to the show has heard that, but I've missed a big one a couple times, and I ended up bumping a really big deer. And the last day of the hunt, I ended up killing a good buck on the 15th day, you know, and it was a freelance hunt the whole way. It was classic, like a lot of the stuff you've talked about, which is, you know, I would get up and, you know, when I decided I was going to move off the piece that I had previously scouted, I was just going to hunt all unknown territory. I walked in at daylight so I could see, and I just scouted until I found hot sign and what I thought was the best stuff, and I set up on it, and I would maybe hunt that till in the afternoon, and if I didn't see what I wanted to see, then I would get down and I would move, and I'd find the next set of hot sign that was the best, and I would hunt that. And then if I, you know, I would leave my stuff in the tree, and I knew how to get in and out of that spot, so I'd come back and hunt that in the morning because I could get in the dark. And then as soon as it would crack daylight, I would sit it to maybe 9. And if I didn't see anything, or if I didn't see what I wanted to see, then I would get down and move and start and do it all over again. And I basically did that rinse repeat for like close to 15 days.
Freelance hunting is really exciting. I mean, because you don't know what you're going to get into. You have no clue.
Well, on that trip, I missed that good deer who was a mid 140s 8-point. Missed him.
Big 8-point.
Yeah, missed him twice, which sucked. I ended up bumping a 180 out of a draw of a CRP field. I was hunting on the ground and ended up bumping him. And then I never scored the deer that I shot, but I ended up shooting a good, I guess he was a mainframe 8 with a kicker off his G2. A good deer. On the 15th day, killed him. And it was just, I mean, I had the time of my life. And what I told people was, and what I always tell people when they ask me about that hunt, I was like, yeah, it was Iowa, and I got to see a bunch of cool deer stuff. I was like, but man, freelance hunting that trip out of state like that, a new terrain, I was like, it was like taking a master's class on deer hunting.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
It was just, I was completely solo. Like I wasn't with anybody. It was a solo trip. Like no one else I knew drew a tag. I had a buddy who lives there, but he lived roughly 30 minutes away from where I was hunting. So we didn't hunt the same areas. He had a lease, you know, and all that stuff. So it was completely solo and completely freelance. And it was the same thing. And what you said earlier about the challenge, man, that's the thing that really gets me going. And so this year, you know, I was going to Missouri, and it was being filmed, you know, and part of me was like, man, you should really go scout, because like you're gonna have a camera guy with you, you know, it's like, it's gonna really suck if you can't find any deer, you know what I mean? But I was like, nah, I was like, I want to do it. Like, I don't want to scout. I want to just go figure it out, you know, and the camera will see what it sees, you know, and it's like it's the process. Right. And so we went out, and John, we got to the first piece, and it was okay. And we got pressure, and we were there for about 2.5 days. And the second day, I had an encounter with 3 bucks. 2 of them were shooter bucks. They were just moving so quick, we couldn't get them stopped. Right. And that was on the ground. I was hunting on the ground that day. So within 2.5 days, got on shooters in Missouri. We ended up leaving that spot, driving an hour and a half west, went to a new piece, hunted that for 2 days, and freelance hunted. We didn't even set up except that the first evening we set up, I think, because it was getting close to dark, and we were like, all right, let's just set up here, because we didn't just see anything that we really liked. And then the next day we had found some stuff, like the first day when we were walking around, that we were like, I'm going to go back there and hunt that the next morning. Ended up having an encounter with a shooter that next morning, and I was set up 20 yards too far to my east. I needed to be 20 yards closer to, like, you know how when you're walking in and you see brush or you see ground cover, and on the ground it looks really, really thick, and you think, oh, I'm in the thick stuff. And then you get into the tree and you realize, oh, the definitive line of the thickness is like 20 yards away. That's what happened. And I needed to be 20 yards further in, and I didn't notice that until those deer came through, and just couldn't get a shot at them. And so a bunch of pressure rolled in. So we hunted that for like 2.5 days. A bunch of pressure rolled in, left that piece, went to another piece we'd never been to. That was like boat access only. And I about got run over the first day. I walked into this cedar thicket, about got run over by a 150-inch deer while I was taking a leak, and then ended up still hunting my way back to him to 40 yards, and he blew out. And then the next day I set up in between the cedar thicket and ended up hitting a deer, and we lost it and didn't find it. I ended up clipping a small branch. And so 3 different pieces of public land in 7 days, and I had 3 encounters.
Lots of opportunities. Yeah. Have you ever thought about taking a Montana Decoy with you?
So I had one with me, and I never busted it out, and I should have. It stayed in my. I think I took it on one hunt with me and never set it up. And just I've not hunted with a decoy in the past, John, and I just was really. I was apprehensive about doing it, and I should have did it in all honesty.
Yeah. Well, decoys can work both ways, you know, especially in Montana where it's not a 3D, it's 2D.
Right.
So, but the cool thing about Montana is Montana, if you're looking at it from the front, it looks like a real deer.
Oh yeah.
It looks way more like a deer than a hard body decoy. And so if you get a deer at a distance, he's going to commit to coming to it as long as he's looking at partially, you know, the front of even if it's at a 45, they're still seeing a deer. When they get close is when they get a little bit leery of it. But if you put it, you know, 10 yards from your tree, you know, maybe by the time they get close, it's 20 or 30 yards from your tree, so you still can shoot it. So as far as when you're hunting on the ground where you've got some open area, having that visual is a big deal. Yeah. And obviously a 3D is just way too cumbersome to tote around. Yeah. For freelancing, it's way too cumbersome.
Yeah. But it's that challenge though, man. Like I left that hunt, even though I didn't get anything right, it bummed me out. I hate hitting a deer and it getting away, you know, but
you had a lot of great hunts.
Yeah. I mean, you know, never hunted any of those pieces before. Yeah. And it's one of those things like you know, continuing. I'm a big like prove it person, right? And so I like to continue to prove to myself I can do the things that I think that I can do. Yeah, you know what I mean. And that's one of those things where it's like I consistently like to challenge myself to go out on these hunts that I don't know the area, I don't know the spot, and force myself to like be uncomfortable and just figure it out. You know, and you know. Look, it's hard to do. What I'll say is this: is I need to adopt more of that in my home state. If I'm being honest with you, because I think I start to learn some of these pieces so to a point to where I start to make overthought decisions, if you will, and I'm not going off of just being a predator and hunting off of instinct. If that makes sense.
Yeah, but I will say this, you know, I would struggle in Michigan to freelance because when I walk in the woods in Michigan, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I really do. It's like, especially if it's dead calm, I'm almost like a big buck. Every step I take, I'm waiting for a reaction someplace, you know? Right. Whereas when I go out in Iowa and Kansas and even in Missouri, I can let my guard down big time and you can freelance. The deer just totally react different, and there's so many mature bucks. Yeah. That you should have opportunities if you're out there for a week. Yeah, exactly. It's just different. And you just got to be really, really cautious when you're hunting in a really heavily pressured area because it doesn't take much to turn those deer around. Yeah, for sure. Screw those deer up. Yeah.
But with that,
man, freelancing is a great, it's a phenomenal way to hunt. You know, it's getting a lot more popular because of the hunting public guys and Garrett's doing a lot of it, and I just love what's going on in the hunting industry now. Now, as far as public land hunting, DIY hunting, saddle hunting, you know, I'm kind of a little turned off by all the people buying up and hoarding all the land. And you know, back 20 years ago, you know, I was killing pretty nice bucks on an annual basis for what everybody else is killing now. There's so many people killing nice bucks because everybody's managing property and, you know, they've got lots of options and lots of big bucks on their property. So hunting has just changed dramatically over the last 15 or 20 years. But I love what the hunting public guys are doing because now somebody that's in PA or New York or New Jersey that shoots a 115 inch, you know, 14, 16 inch 8-point or small 10-point, you know, that's a big deal. And now he doesn't have to be ashamed to show it to somebody. God, 5 years ago, you put a 110-inch deer online, and everybody's like, "What'd you shoot that thing for?" And that's sick to me. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I've always
depending
said,
on where you're hunting, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. And I've always said, I was like, man, there's guys in Michigan and Pennsylvania and just high pressure places in general that are consistently killing 110-inch deer every year. I was like, and they're
badass hunters.
And that guy is a killer. You know what I mean? Because it's like he's in his area. He's killing the top end of the deer in his area. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's the bottom line. You hit that nail right on the head.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's kind of like, people will ask me like what I'm after or whatever, and I always say, you know, for me, it's in Pennsylvania.
Depends on where you're on.
Yeah, I was like, I'm trying to shoot a 3-year-old. I was like, because in this area, is like that's the top end of like the age structure for this area. You know, and it's like a 3-year-old around here is probably going to be an 8-point that's like right around Pope. Like he's going to be between 115 and 125 inches probably. You know, I was like roughly. So, but with that, man, is there anything else about out-of-state hunting that we haven't hit that we should touch on real quick? Or do you think we covered it adequately? We were all over the place.
Well, I still think if a guy lives up in the Northeast or, you know, Michigan, PA, any place up in the Northeast where hunting's really tough, December. I still think a guy don't pass up that December hunting, because you get out there in a lot of those lightly pressured states, and December hunting can be phenomenal because there's still a lot of big bucks left. Yep. There's a lot of big bucks left. When I think I'm 2 for 3 in Illinois going to public land in December right after gun season. But always wait. You know, if you can, try and go after they get some semblance of a fresh snow.
Right.
Because then you're looking at sign that's 24 hours old. You're looking at fresh sign, and by then they're pretty routine, and their travel movements are pretty routine because they're typically bedding to a feeding area at that time. So as long as you got some semblance of security cover, you can find some traffic flow through. You know, it's easy to set up on, and you're probably going to get an opportunity because they're still moving in. Out west, they tend to move in the daylight hours pretty much all year.
Right. And make sure you go to Kansas earlier versus later. That way your bucks aren't busted up. If
you go in December, you're definitely going to, about 70% of the deer are going to be busted up for sure.
All right, John. So with that, man, before I let you get going, I appreciate you doing this whole series. I always love talking to you, man. I could talk to you forever. You know, just you have a ton of information to share with folks, and you always have a really great way of sharing it. And I just appreciate our friendship. So I appreciate you coming on. But before I let you go,
thank you, Clint.
Yeah, man. Let everyone know where they can find out more about you, your YouTube page or your YouTube channel, the workshops you have going on, the books, like all the things they could, learn about John Eberhart.
Okay. Website is deer-john.net. My workshops are on there. And again, I've mentioned this on the previous two. I think my March shop is full. My first April shop only has 2 openings. The other one's 3 openings. So there's only a few spots left. The May one still has a lot of openings. But that's all on my website. And my books are for sale and my DVDs are for sale on the website. I have a new Eberhardt signature saddle, which is a 2-panel saddle, which is hands down the most comfortable saddle you can buy, because you can totally adjust it as far as seat depth and whatever you want up on your back, and it stays under your butt. You never find yourself lifting your weight up and pushing it back under your butt. A 2-panel, the inner panel always stays under your butt in one spot all the time. And that's only available on Tethered. Tethered's the only website you can buy that on. And I also got a YouTube channel. It's called Eberhardt's Outdoors, and we've got a lot of good stuff coming up this spring. We did a lot of filming on postseason scouting last year that we're going to start posting this spring. We filmed it during postseason, but we didn't start the channel last year till I think it was May or June. So it was beyond postseason. So I didn't want to show footage of stuff that was beyond what the viewer could do at that point in time. So we're going to show that stuff then. And I'm going to have a lot more stuff on instructional saddle hunting, because a lot of the saddle stuff you see on YouTube is pretty lame. Right. In my opinion.
Yep. Awesome, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Good luck to you in your scouting this postseason.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I know. I'm itching to get out myself, and I'm sure I'll be pinging you with some questions. I'm actually going to text you a couple pictures of deer after that, so be looking at your phone.
And keep in mind, you guys, on the scouting, to me, and I think Clint would definitely agree with this, scouting and location preparation and figuring out entry routes and exit routes, proper entry routes and exit routes, and seasonal daily timing, that's 90% of the hunting. Figuring out how to hunt a location is much more important than actually hunting the location.
100%.
Yep. Picking out the right spot and the right tree, the right height, the right entry route, the right exit route, everything has to combine to be consistently successful.
Yep. And the good news is, guys out there listening, that John and I actually did a whole podcast on that, and I will share those notes in the show notes, so you guys can easily get to that. It's a whole session on on access and exit. So with that, John, I appreciate you coming on, brother. And you have yourself a good night, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, thanks, Clint. Everybody have a good time out there.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those two things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.